Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Absolute Scenes. This is number 84 on our list of reviewing the IMDb Top 100 Bucket List Films to See Before You Die. Today we've got Amadeus. It is a 1984 film based on a play. It's directed by Milos Forman, and it won 8 Oscars and was nominated for 11. It is a fictional depiction of the rivalry between two composers, Mozart and Antonio Salieri, in 19th century Vienna, and it's told through a recollection of an old and washed up, now hospitalized version of Salieri. It stars Tom Hulce as Wolfgang Mozart and Murray Abraham as Salieri in the two lead roles. We'll be talking spoiler-free, giving it a rating on our system, and then talking about the film in a bit more detail with spoilers at the end. So stick around with us and we'll see whether this film was a work of Mozart or hit a few flat notes. So Dan, I watched the director's cut version. It was 3 hours long. So it was a lot of classical music and opera. What did you think about opera as a theme of a film? Did you enjoy that?
It was a little mixed. I am not versed in opera at all, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend to. Obviously, we've had Opera Gate for Citizen Kane, where we were both sat thinking, I don't know if this is good or bad. And the first major opera scene in this film was a little bit the same. I was just sat there like an idiot thinking, is this fantastic? Is this awful? I'm not entirely sure. But this woman is going on for a little bit. But there is a lot more opera scenes in this film. And I found some of them actually really quite palatable and some more quite interesting. And having them sort of explain what the meanings behind some of them were really, really helped. Some of the dialogue also helped in terms of, yes, this was great, but you're going to bore people with a 4 hour long opera. So that helps sort of contextualize some of the audience's reactions to certain operas in it, which was absolutely brilliant. I really enjoyed that aspect to it. Overall, I was a little disappointed with some of the Mozart music choices because there are some really famous Mozart songs out there that weren't in this that I think would have made me feel a little better about about watching a film like this, made me feel a little bit smarter. But ultimately, there was a very particular direction for it, and the choices that they made make a lot of sense. And this is largely about Mozart's inspirations for his career in opera, opposed to just his symphonies and other songs. What do you make of the opera?
Yeah, same with you. I'm by no means an opera expert. I'd probably switch it off normally, to be honest. But I think for the film, it actually worked well, and I agree with you. Largely, that was down to the characters giving context to it. I think it was really helpful and a good way of telling the story that it was from Salieri's viewpoint. So you were constantly getting his commentary on Mozart's pieces or his own. So when the operas were on screen, he was kind of talking about his reaction to it, what feelings it gave him, and that really helped me when I was watching them, because it's very difficult otherwise. Operas. I think the thing that turns me off is they're in a different language, can't really understand what's happening, and that really helped. But obviously, it's the main part of the film, but the music I think is absolutely fantastic. I think that is the real biggest draw of this film for me, is that I enjoyed listening to the music. As you say, it's probably not some of the most famous pieces that you might have heard, and I think that's quite good. Discover something new with the film. It's not just listening to songs that you already know. It's not Rocket Man. It's not whatever
It's
the
not
Queen was.
Mozart's greatest hits, is it not?
Yeah, well, they love doing that these days, don't they? Just let's just turn an album into a film, or a greatest hits album into a film and loosely put a story around it. Whereas this is the opposite, isn't it? The I know it's kind of a fictional story, but it's a story centered on relationship with these two people in a certain period of his life, and it just happens that there's some fantastic music that goes with it, but it's story led rather than song led that you quite often get in kind of modern musical biopics.
With regards to this being a fictional account of real life people, so just put it into context without spoiling the film at all. After Salieri died in real life, there was a play put on which was then turned into another play in the 20th century, which this film uses as its backdrop. The storyline and what happens and the conjecture is all from hearsay. It's not true as far as we actually know. So, with that in mind, with this being a biopic, how did you feel about that? Was this something that you thought, I love the fact that they went off and just done their own thing and it's from an unreliable narrator, or were you annoyed because, well, you didn't really learn anything?
I don't think everything's got to be about a history lesson. I think it was quite good because I read up some of the history about Mozart after the film, thinking I knew it was fictional, but at the same time I realized I didn't really know much about him, didn't know about his death, didn't know about his life, and it asks some interesting questions. It's loosely based on him as a person, but certainly they've taken some artistic liberty, and I don't think that, for me, there's not really too much of a problem with that. Is that, did you want it more of a historical recreation of that period of their lives?
So for me, yeah, when I watch a biopic, I like to learn as much as I can about the individuals involved. These are geniuses. I'm sure they're interesting enough. And obviously, with the original play, it was based on what they believed did happen and is now sort of proven not to be. So I kind of get 500-600 years ago why this might have been a thing. I think it's kind of exploitative of, oh, we can use these two ultra famous composers to tell our story. Whereas I think the story itself is absolutely fantastic. This idea of how respectful rivalry can manifest into something more, and the relationship, particularly between Salieri to Mozart, is so interesting. So I was still invested for the film and I still enjoyed those moments. It's not a case of I don't like it because it's inaccurate. It's just, if I had a preference, I'd rather see that dynamic happen with a completely fictional story, maybe set on something else, and then have the true story of Mozart, because he's an incredibly interesting person. The things that were realistic, though, that I think were fantastic, was capturing who Mozart was as a person, which is something that I never really knew. I don't think lots of people will know, but he's the original child star. He's the OG of children getting forced into doing things that they perhaps don't want to do and having their childhood taken away. And because of that, he grows up really clinging to his childhood. He doesn't know how to act appropriately with women. He wants to party all the time and dress up, and he's got a very childish laugh. I think in real life, he would believe he had ADHD among some other things. So I thought that was really well done to show us that more than anything else. Did you like Mozart's character in that sense?
I didn't like his character. I mean,
Yeah, but you know what I mean.
That laugh was incredibly annoying to listen to.
Horrendous. That is a definite negative. I've never heard anyone with ADHD have a laugh like that, and I don't think there's any reports that Mozart had a particularly annoying laugh. Apparently, the actor based it on a director that he had worked with in the past. I think that was a bad choice.
The laugh was annoying, but yeah, I can see what they were trying to drive at with the character. I don't know if that was particularly realistic, but yeah, as you say, he was taken around Europe as a small boy to play piano in front of many famous people. So I can understand how he may have ended up like that as a result of, yeah, not maybe living the normal childhood that everybody has. And ultimately, it's there to really contrast against Salieri as the other main character, isn't it? You know, he's a very stern, serious individual that he almost believes that his musical ability has been gifted from God.
Yeah.
And actually believes that of Mozart too, and that's partly where his kind of disbelief at why God's chosen Mozart as a person. So I think it's probably exaggerated, as I think all of the previous films I've been talking about recently in the list is the characters are always exaggerated to really give the differences and and you can it drives the motivation of the characters a bit more, I think. As you say, Salieri, I think, is probably the more interesting character in terms of the film for me. You know,
Million percent.
he it is.
1 million.
I find it really difficult through the film, and this is where I guess, where the most of the intrigue and enjoyment of the film is that he's so torn between the respect for Mozart's musical ability and the the jealousy, really. It's really interesting to see where he's going to take it, what he's going to do, and how he's dealing with it. Because from scene to scene, it's almost like he's going to put his arm around him and they're going to work together. And then the next scene, he's got something much more distasteful planned. So how did you kind of find the characters, so the two main characters, and then maybe some of the other supporting cast?
Yeah, I thought, like I say, Salieri was the most interesting character. His relationship with God in this film is absolutely exceptional. His twisted mind and how he's portrayed things, and it's almost like because of the time frame, I think it would have been before likes of Nietzsche, etc. He's having an existential crisis, but there at the time there's no such thing as existential crises. There's no such thing as nihilism. He is on the cusp of losing his faith, but in a sense where he sort of becomes the devil. He works against God and God's favorite creation, who is Mozart. And deep down, all he wants to do is be Mozart. And it's not that he would ever be threatened by Mozart on its own. It's that, as he says, he is mediocrity. So it's the fact that Mozart is so much better than him, which I don't think was overly true in real life. I think he was a phenomenal composer in real life by all regards, although he is right at the beginning of the film when he says people have stopped listening to me, because I'd personally never heard of him. But from listening, wanted to have a little look before we did this to see what other people thought, and he is incredibly well respected. So it's good enough for me. But I think everyone's heard of Mozart, and I don't think too many people outside of music will know who Salieri is. For Mozart himself, like I say, I thought his character was incredibly interesting to see how his upbringing created him into this person. My biggest sort of critique of the film would be that I don't think we got enough of it. We got exposition for how Mozart grew up, and then we're sort of showing the rest, which is fine because it is about their relationship, which I appreciate that's the direction it goes. But if I was to watch another Mozart film, I really want to see him from the age of 5, when his father first discovers that he's got talent, right the way through to his adulthood, so that we can really see how he turns into someone without boundaries who likes to stay in a childlike state. The supporting characters, I thought, were pretty good. No one was outstanding, I don't think. I suppose the one thing that really, really wound me up was that everyone had an American accent. And it, for things like this, obviously you expect the really posh British accent when the period piece is on, regardless of the country. Ancient Greece, British. But I just think you went for Oscars here and won a lot. Can you not put on some German accents, or Austrian German, or Italian accents? It's really hard when at the beginning you're trying to figure out who all these people are, and it's like, well, why are you so protective of Italian opera? Oh, because you're Italian. It just, you spoke really, really posh English. So all the Italians spoke with a British accent, and all the Germans spoke with an American accent. And that was just constantly pulling me out the film. I didn't really like that. I don't know how you felt about it.
Well, it was choices of how it was done, wasn't it? Because
Yeah.
it's Americanized, right? They've all got American accents, but also there's a lot of artistic license in terms of the kind of social etiquette of how they talk to one another. You know, Mozart like swearing and being really brash and opinionated in front of the king, for example. I don't think that's probably not particularly realistic as to how that would happen. And so it was a little bit of a dramatized American version of things. I'm not too fussed on the accents necessarily, but what kind of annoys me is when they do everything in English and then throw random Italian words in, and it's because that then confuses things as to, I know they're not speaking Italian, so when you throw in a random Italian word, then it makes me think, oh, they're actually all speaking English in Germany, and you've thrown a random Italian word. It's just
her Mozart, her everyone. Why?
well,
Because obviously her means Mister in
but,
German. What?
but that's to solve the problem you were talking about. You wanted to know if they were Italian or German, and he solved that by calling them Herr Mozart and Signori Salieri. So he was trying to show their nationalities through how he pronounced Mr. and Mrs. But it was more like when they were like "Grazia" things, and it's like, well, you're speaking English in this film, so I don't.
Yeah.
It just annoys me when they do that. Either just put it all in Italian and put it with subtitles, or just keep it all in English.
Yeah, it's the choice of dialogue stuff like you're not going to have a pot to piss in. I didn't write them down, but there were at least 4 phrases that are 20th century cliche American phrases. So I thought, look, if fair enough, you're going to have some American actors, whatever. Okay, it's a bit annoying. And by the way, it's not like I didn't want them all to speak British either. I wanted them to speak with the accent that they should be speaking in. In English is fine, or like you say, with subtitles, but let's say English. But just with the correct accent, that would be great. But when you're actually writing dialogue that is not true to any kind of the period that they're speaking in, it doesn't have to be really, really on point, but just make a little bit of effort and not completely pull me out.
See, I quite like it because I think it's a bit more accessible. It really annoys me when you watch period dramas and the writers try to write all the dialogue as if he thinks he's Shakespeare. And, it's all like metaphors and floral language. And you're like, I've got no idea what that person's even saying. So I thought this was really accessible, and I quite like the dialogue as a result of it.
I don't mind some of the, like, a lot of the dialogue's fine. It's just there are 4 or 5 bits where it's like, why are you speaking this way? Why have you just turned into an actual 1980s American rock star? But maybe that was the point. Maybe he was trying to show a comparison between Mozart and contemporary artists.
Yeah, rock star.
Maybe, I don't know. One last thing, production design is absolutely incredible in this. I don't think they did enough with the camera work in terms of really showing off what they'd done. I felt every scene was quite confined. I didn't ever think I got a really good picture of Vienna in this day and age, which is something that I really would have liked. Just to pull everything out, we see the inside of the palace, we see the inside of the opera house, we see the interiors all the time. I think there's like 3 or 4 exterior shots, and one looks like it's in the palace grounds anyway. I'd like a little bit more, traveling from the palace to the opera house, just to flesh out that world and to see everything. But what they did do was absolutely brilliant. 10 out of 10 production design. Is that something that you picked up on, or were you just not bothered? Or
the costume was great. I mean, see, it's kind of expected with a period film, but I thought it was particularly good in this. I liked all the wigs. I also like they went to a bit of effort to kind of show that people weren't always dressed up like that. There was lots of scenes where they were in their more relaxed attire, or you see them at different times of the day. So it's not constantly that falsehood that everyone was constantly dressed for a ball, which I thought was quite a good choice. The scenes inside the opera house, I thought were some great scenes, and to see the crowd and how they'd presented that, I thought was good. And the fact that I always find it good when you're offering a bit of a stage show on a film, so I quite like that. So yeah, I thought it was good visually.
I thought, like you say, with the opera scenes, what's most important is how well it was directed, in terms of when we don't understand what the hell's going on with opera, we need the reaction of the crowd. And in so many opera scenes, it's just there's 2 go-to sort of emotions: sleepy boredom, oh, I don't know what's going on here, and they're starting nattering away, or someone just closing their eyes and going with it, and it's like, oh, so you're enjoying this, great. Because Mozart was such a diverse character, and he really wrote a lot of his operas on the edge of what he was allowed to do and sometimes going beyond it. We had so many great interactions from the audience where it was, is he going too far? We've got, oh my God, this guy is a genius, from the person that hates him more than anyone else in the world. And I thought that is what really sold those opera scenes, as well as everything going on stage. So the fact that we got those human moments to show us the story and what's going on through subtext, as well as the production value happening on stage, was fabulously done. So let's get on to ratings, Mitchell. On our enjoyment scale, what are you giving this out of 10?
Yeah, I think rating it for enjoyment's a tough one. It was there was lots of good things about the film. I enjoyed the music, enjoyed the costume. As you say, I thought it was really good, really well done to explain to me what was happening with the opera, so I could enjoy that more. But it's probably not a kind of theme of a film that I love. It was quite long. Not sure I was engaged throughout the whole thing. So I'm going to be fairly mid-range for me today, 7.3.
Ooh. Yeah, I agree. I think it did a lot of things right. I think it did some things that I didn't particularly like personally. There are moments that really kept me captivated, but there were moments that I was just completely not bothered about. So I'm going to give this a 6.9.
Yeah, I mean, to quote the king from the film, there was probably too many notes. Too many
Too
notes.
many notes, potentially in the wrong places as well. I would have liked some notes maybe elsewhere.
And I mean, in terms of technical quality, I think it is much higher than on the enjoyment scale. Yeah, that relationship between the characters, I think, was incredibly well done, and the kind of polar opposite way they were presented. Music, costumes, fantastic. So I think we'll go with an 8.4.
Okay, I think that's pretty much on the money for IMDb is anyway, isn't it? I again think this is a mixed bag. I think production value is 10. It's fantastic. The ability of some of the actors was incredible musically. I think the acting was quite hit and miss. Salieri is fantastic, absolutely fantastic. I thought Amadeus was hit and miss, and the people around them were just fairly flat. All right. It's really hard to judge technical quality in terms of the screenplay or script, because I think you've got a fantastic story given to us in which not that much of it's accurate. I thought the direction was excellent at points that it needed to be, but at times didn't do much else. And the first 15 minutes in particular, I actually think felt longer than the next 2 hours, which was a little bit of a problem. So I think this is about a 7.8 in terms of technical quality. If you've seen Amadeus, let us know what you thought about it in the comments. Give us a rating on technical quality and how much you enjoyed it. And if you've seen the non-director's cut, let us know, because I'd like to know what the differences were and which one's better. Stay with us, because we are going to talk about spoilers now. If you haven't seen it, I think we're recommending that you watch it maybe when you have 3 hours spare. Come back and watch the spoilers afterwards, unless you just don't care about ever watching it and you want to stay with us anyway. Is there anything spoilery that you want to talk about with the acting? We'll get started with that.
Pick up on what you said. The two main characters, I think, are fantastically well acted, but around that, there's not too much happening. I think the wife is a pretty disappointing acting performance. Constance.
Yeah.
The king, I would like to have maybe seen a bit more from him, because there are several stages at which he drives a bit of the narrative. You know how he's going to react to certain things, and he didn't really offer too much there. I would like him to have been acted in a bit of a stronger way, and the same as some of the advisors around him. So I agree. I don't think the acting was anything particularly special outside of that. Though Simon Callow was quite good, but he only came in right towards the end as the kind of actor and performer in Mozart's operas at the end. But yeah, it was really led by the two main leads, and I thought they were great.
Yeah, like I say, the Amadeus performance was a bit hit and miss for me. I thought he was great towards the end. And there were flashes, and particularly him playing the piano, things like that, which was all really done. It was amazing. Just a few little things, the laughter. At certain points, he actually wasn't given that much to do. In the middle, it was quite bizarre. I kind of think that the film was riding the coattails of us all knowing who Mozart was and hearing the name Mozart, whereas I think it would have benefited if it treated the audience like we've never heard of this person. Who is this person? But we've got 10, 15 minutes. I think I clocked it at 15 minutes, the exposition at the beginning. And I really didn't like it. I thought it felt really long, and yet it was rushed. I just think it was obviously that stylistic choice to go with the narrator of Salieri, which I think paid off in the end, because the way that he would talk about his emotions and give us his narrative and how he was feeling, and that really fleshed out what they wanted to tell as a story, which, as you mentioned earlier, is that conflict within him of admiration and envy. So that was really important. It just took a little bit to get into, because ultimately I'm the film's called Amadeus. So I've came into this wanting to know about Mozart, not necessarily this other person. And as much as they made that relationship as interesting as possible, and it was, as far as any film goes, incredibly interesting. It was really well done, and both sides of that relationship went absolutely brilliantly together. But is that what people are going to see?
Do you think it did enough telling some of the story of Mozart? So there's a couple of things I pick up, and one is the decision for him to move to Vienna from Salzburg. You do see that occur, but you don't really understand his motivation for it properly. And then the other is, do you think it did enough to show you him struggling with his debts and his drinking? And I know there was a couple of scenes, but did it really explain that well enough, what he was going through? Because it showed you he kind of went to a party late at night, and then he turned up at someone's house to ask for some money. Do you think it could have could have done more during that period to properly show you what his
Yeah, it was
mental
quick.
his mental state was?
Yeah, I think it happened quite quickly in the film. And other than the scene where he begs the gentleman who had hired him to teach his daughter and had the dogs bark and all that sort of stuff, except for when he begged him for money. Before that, you knew where the story was going. It's like, oh, he's going to have an alcohol addiction. He's probably going to kill him. I can totally see what is happening here. I've seen it a bunch of other times. However, this was 1984. So a lot of the films that I've seen since, things like The Libertine about John Wilmot II, is formulaic as that sort of became. I don't think it did a great job of transitioning from A to B, and especially the debts. I had no idea about the debts in this film until someone outright said it. I've heard like, oh, you're struggling with it, and he's got to go and ask Salieri for the money. Whereas I think it could have showed us more how we. I don't know the economics of writing operas and teaching music. I would have figured he'd be one of the richest men in Vienna, and obviously it's because he's spending it on parties and stuff. But I still can't put into context. It's a bit like if we saw a movie about Bill Gates and he's spending loads of money on parties, we know that that does not matter because he's a billionaire. If we were seeing this about a rock band or a pop band, like a boy group where they aren't writing their own songs and they're privy to money from the record label and things like that, then we'll go, oh, okay, I can see how this is going to turn bad. The spending money that they have, but that's not going to last forever. They're not going to get royalties. I understand what's happening. None of that is explained. I'm not a historian. I don't know any of that. So he's wearing lovely things. I mean, could he not sell some stuff? That's that what I was thinking at the time. You've got all this crap lying around. Can you not sell it to get some money instead of working yourself to death? Didn't quite make sense to me. I don't know if you'd thought of that or felt the same.
I think it's difficult. I agree. It doesn't explain itself very well as to why writing and performing an opera doesn't pay very well, but tutoring a child to play the piano is where the money is at.
Yeah.
I don't think it does that very well. But I think this is one of the problems with it being like a kind of stylized American version of, you're saying why you can't sell. When you watch other period dramas around that time, it's like if you're in a particular class, you can't be seen to have debts, and it's quite
Yeah.
it's quite a lot about how ostentatious and showy you've got to be with your clothes. A bit of a keeping up with the Joneses type thing.
You know, the Georges.
Joneses, isn't that what I said?
You said Georges then Joneses?
George Jones. Yeah, so in other period dramas, it might explore that a bit of, why they can't, because it's one thing not having any money. It's another thing not having any money and not having your social status anymore. So maybe there was.
But it explained that he'd lost that social status anyway because no one wanted him around the daughters, and he was seen to be a drunk and aloof, and he was incredibly outspoken. Obviously, someone with ADHD at that time, ADHD sounds like a TV that with ADHD at that time, without things like that being diagnosed, would really, really maybe freak some people out or get under their skin, or he certainly wouldn't be adhering to etiquette. So we saw that he wasn't this trusted figure anymore anyway. That's why he got certain types of jobs, or he had to go begging, and that all came out in the wash. So at that point, when you're at your lowest of your low, sell your stuff. You had loads of stuff to sell, loads of it. Just
it might not have been his. He might have had that on the tick.
On the tick, did he? Did he? Oh, did you get the craze round? Bright House got them all. Bright House, only 18 months, didn't do a credit check on him.
Yeah. What do you think, Dan? What do you think about his parties? Would you have gone to his parties? I've got a problem. I've got. You'd have been the guy on the piano.
Yeah, the mortal guy on the piano kicking Mozart off to play Titanic.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that in action. You know what annoys me about the party though, and this seems to be like a go-to plot device in a lot of these kind of dramas, is masked balls, and how you can't tell anyone's identity when they've got a small mask that covers half their face. So when like Salieri comes in and goes, do an impression of Salieri, but it's in his very distinctive deep voice, and he's got this half a mask on his face, and we're like not meant to believe that he doesn't recognize him.
I think it didn't. Fair play to the film. Usually, you're absolutely right. The mask's about this big, isn't it? Whereas it's got the feathers and stuff, so it does cover quite a bit of his face. I think it's a fair attempt at it, but I do know what you mean. The Clark Kent effect. As if there's a vendor there selling masks, though. He was just, oh, there you go, mate. Thanks for the mask. Like,
maybe that's how it worked.
Maybe it was. I enjoyed some of the masks. I liked how they got dressed for that party in particular, where they went and got fitted and were wearing these massive, really fun, sort of more like fancy dress than anything else. Yeah, I would love to have went to some of those parties. Mozart playing on the piano. Everyone's absolutely out of the mind drunk. Sounds a bit of me, that. What did you make of the motivation of Salieri in terms of, the beginning of the film, where he is making his vow to God, and that being the sort of the crux of the film, if anything? That for me was the thing that I held on to most. His relationship with God, and then Mozart as the God's beast. I think he kept on calling him a beast. But what did he make of all that? How he was willing to give up his his chastity and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting. I thought it was a good choice for the film to try and give some motivation to Salieri. It would be quite thin if it was just a jealous person because there was someone slightly better than them. But this whole kind of backdrop of him believing he was given this gift from God, someone else has been given this competing gift from God, and it's his less worthy than Mozart's, and him trying to understand the kind of spiritual nature behind that, I think is quite interesting. So yeah, I thought the motivations were one thing about motivations that annoyed me a little bit was was Mozart's relationship with his father, because you talked earlier about like didn't have his childhood and potentially that's why he behaved in a certain way, and I thought there was going to be a lot more when his father came back into his life about how that was going to determine and change some of his behavior. So I was a little disappointed for why that even really had to happen.
I think it had to happen. I don't think it was done well, but I think it had to happen so that he could be dressed in a certain way so that we could then see his grief when his father dies, and that he could then be exploited by Salieri to write the song that he would end up stealing for his own funeral, sort of thing. I agree. I didn't really feel any connection there with his father, which is why I think it's so important that the early years of Mozart are shown more. If you want to make a 3-hour film, cut some of the other stuff that no one cares about and give us a real introduction. I appreciate that's really hard when you went for the decision of having a narrator, and therefore it needs to be from this person's point of view. It cannot be from Mozart's point of view. Maybe there is a way of changing that somehow, but I just didn't get any real feeling from the film about these sorts of things. Where I sort of got it from was thinking about real life, thinking about people like Lindsay Lohan and Michael Jackson, and these sorts of people that when they are thrust into the limelight, they eventually go off the rails in one way or another. If it wasn't for real life stories, I don't think I would have understood from this film. It just, the beginning didn't do enough to showcase why Mozart was this way. And that includes his relationship with his father. So his father comes back. There's nothing particularly redeemable about his father either. So when he dies, we can understand why Mozart's upset. His father's died. But we aren't upset. We just think, he's not bad enough to wish death on the bloke. But it's like, well, we've all got to go, and I don't really care about you. He died off screen. He died in Salzburg. We didn't see the death. It was just, all right, this is just a plot device. So this is the point where Mozart really starts drinking now, and this is when things are going to start going off the rails. Oh, okay. You can just see it coming from a mile away, but I don't think it earned it.
But that's what I found strange, because he died off screen. He died actually in a completely different city. There was no reason to have that 10-15 minute period when he came back into his life, because it didn't seem to serve much purpose to me.
And I think his father was there to maybe try and tell us a few things in terms of, as you said earlier, about etiquette, like you shouldn't be borrowing, and we can't accept these gifts, but this is not how things work. I suppose I liked the character of Mozart's wife. I don't think the acting was very good, but I liked her character. She was very strong, and she had her head screwed on, and she was the sort of polar opposite of Mozart. And despite fully loving him, was, we'll keep the money. She wasn't trusting of people in a good way. She had a really good, strong sense of character for certain people. She was a good judge of character. And to see her stand up to Mozart's father, whereas he couldn't, I thought was really enjoyable. And I thought it portrayed her in a really good light. Like I say, I just don't think the actress was particularly great. And I'm confident, I don't think she's been in anything of any note since. So
I mean, ultimately, this film's about a relationship or rivalry between two people set with the backdrop of music and opera. Do you think that you would have enjoyed it had it been the same story practically, but with a completely different genre or context? Like, let's say if it was sports, or if it was modern music, or something else like that.
Yes, absolutely. I think this has got a good case of the Good Will Huntings in terms of it doesn't matter. Like was said in that film, Will doesn't have to be a genius. He could be he could be a pianist. This could have been, a child actor, a child sports person, a musician set in a different time period, a more modern time period, and all that. Like it just does not matter, because the single most interesting thing about it is having this conflict within a character based on his crumbling belief in God and God's motivation, and trying to figure all that out is an incredibly modern idea. And it's the most important and interesting thing in the story. I'd rather have two films out of this. I'd rather have a real life depiction of Mozart, learning about his upbringing, his experience, what happened to him, how he sort of came off the rails, people would treat him with his ADHD, that sort of thing. I think that's an incredibly interesting story as it is, and especially something that could make history that could be boring more accessible, and then maybe more people will listen to Mozart. And then this story that they had, just adapt it into something else, any other kind of thing that doesn't need to be 3 hours long, doesn't need to include a bunch of other things. One scene that I thought was amazing, the acting was incredible, but the feeling that I got from watching it was where they came together to write at the end on his deathbed. Did you enjoy that, or had you sort of switched off by then?
I thought it was useful, and it really kind of brought home to you the differences between them two in terms of their talent. When Mozart's kind of feeling the music and describing it, and now these are coming in, and he's kind of living that as he's coming up with the music, whereas Salieri's very much
pen
and paper. He's learned how to do this, and he's too fast. I can't write down that fast. It was really driving towards the differences there of this this natural fantastic talent of this one person, and this much more kind of learned industrial good description. So I thought it was a really good kind of crescendo to the film to build towards at the end.
I liked how it sort of really give away, without telling anyone, Salieri's true motivation, and that was he just wanted to be a part of it. He just wanted to be an instrument of God. He wanted to have that come through him. And in those moments, he felt that way, because he keeps on talking about, Mozart being, God's creation, and that's who God wants the music to be played through. And that Mozart needs him now to write this down, that he therefore becomes an extension of God and God's voice. And from being a part of it with him, he achieves fleetingly his dream for a few seconds until, as he says, 32 years of torture afterwards, which again, I don't think, this is one thing that's kind of annoying. Mozart actually, and this should be in my version of the film, we see Mozart's childhood, all this sort of stuff, is that Mozart wasn't particularly popular at the time anyway. It was long after he died that people saw the genius in what he was doing. Salieri was far more popular during Mozart's day. So I find all of that very ingenuous. And to see how a genius at work is actually underappreciated, because, if you watch something like Bohemian Rhapsody or whatever else, another incredibly inaccurate film, we know that they are going to be the biggest band in the world and they're going to be great, and then the pitfalls can come. I think what's great with this story in real life is that Mozart never saw that. He died at 35, 36, 37, something like that, mid-30s. And he wasn't popularized at the time at all. It was a lot of it was through the scandal of Salieri being accused of murdering him, and in his dementia not really being able to fight back against it. So a lot of it was a mishmash, and I'd rather just have two concise films, because the film that we got shown with the relationship is fantastic.
Well, thank you very much for watching our review of Amadeus. I thought it was okay. I'd watch it. I'd recommend it. Dan obviously just wanted to watch a documentary of Mozart's life. So if you wanted that as well, let us know in the comments below. See what you thought in terms of enjoyment and technical quality on our scales. If you did like the video, please subscribe to the channel, watch some more of our videos, and give a like. If you want to hear some of the other stuff we're talking about with films, follow us on Twitter at scenes_YT. and join us for our next video, which is
Reservoir Dogs.
back with Tarantino. So more Tarantino for the
Tarantino.
list, more things for us to talk about. So thanks for watching.
Bye.